The lawyer's hand was cold when he pressed the envelope into mine. We were standing in the back corner of Riverside Memorial Chapel in Portland, Oregon, where the September rain drummed against stained glass windows and the smell of lilies mixed with old carpet. My father's casket sat 20 feet away, polished mahogany under soft lighting, surrounded by people who couldn't name his favorite song or remember the last real conversation they'd had with him. But they remembered he had money. I could feel it in the way my mother's shoulders straightened when the estate attorney arrived. In the way my brother kept glancing at his Apple Watch between fake sniffles. In the way my sister Diane stood too close to the lawyer, laughing at something that wasn't funny, her Nordstrom blazer still creased from the rush to look presentable for people she hadn't seen in years. The envelope was manila, bent at one corner like it had been handled 100 times before today. Across the front, my father's handwriting, the same slanted script from birthday cards and sticky notes left on the fridge, except this time the message wasn't warm. It was a warning, open only when they ask for money. Before I continue, I want you to pause for a second. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story, and also tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing cities and states pop up in the comments. And if you've ever been pushed aside by the very people who were supposed to protect you, drop a comment below. Your story matters. Not if. When. My throat tightened. Your father insisted, the lawyer said quietly, his voice barely audible under the organ music bleeding through the chapel speakers. He was older, maybe 70, with silver hair and the kind of tired eyes that had seen too many families tear themselves apart over wills. He was very specific about the timing. Before I could respond, my mother's voice cut through from across the room. Sweetheart, what's that? Her tone was casual, practiced, the same one she used when she'd text me at 11 p.m. asking if I could Venmo her $300 for an emergency that was never really an emergency. I folded the envelope once and slid it into my purse, the leather strap suddenly feeling heavier. Just paperwork, I said. She didn't believe me. I could tell by the way her smile thinned, by the way Diane's head tilted like a hawk spotting movement in tall grass. My brother Kyle finally looked up from his phone. For a second, nobody moved. The chapel felt smaller. The air thicker. Then my mother's expression softened into something almost kind, almost real, and she reached for my hand. We'll get through this together, she said. But her palm was dry. Her grip was loose. And her eyes, those same eyes that used to hold me when I cried as a kid, were focused 3 inches past my face, staring at the outline of the envelope tucked inside my bag. I thought about my father then. Not the man in the casket, but the one who used to sit in his garage in Northeast Portland on Sunday mornings, drinking black coffee from a chipped Blazers mug, organizing old tools he'd never use again. The one who asked me once, 2 Thanksgivings ago, if I ever got tired of being the strong one. I'd laughed it off. Told him I was fine. That's what you do when you're the daughter who works in tech, who has a 401k and a decent apartment in the Pearl District, who doesn't complain because complaining makes you ungrateful. But he didn't laugh. He just nodded, slow and sad, like he already knew the answer I wouldn't say out loud. Now he was gone. And I was standing in a funeral home holding an envelope that felt like a bomb with a timer I couldn't see. The lawyer touched my shoulder once, gentle, then disappeared into the crowd of mourners who weren't really mourning. My mother squeezed my hand. My sister smiled. My brother typed something on his phone, probably calculating how much a house in Laurelhurst was worth these days. And me? I stood there, rain streaking down the windows behind me, surrounded by people I'd bled myself dry for, and realized my father had seen it all. He'd watched them take. He'd watched me give. And whatever was inside that envelope, whatever plan he'd left behind, it wasn't mercy. It was reckoning. I should tell you something before we go further. This isn't one of those stories where family drama gets resolved over Thanksgiving dinner and someone learns a valuable lesson about forgiveness. This is about something quieter and sharper. It's about the invisible contract some of us sign without realizing it, the one that says your worth is measured by how much you can give, how quietly you can shrink, how long you can keep solving problems that were never yours to fix. My name is Rachel, and for most of my 32 years, I believed being the dependable one was a strength. The one who answers at 2 a.m. when mom calls about a car repair she can't afford. The one who co-signs loans and covers rent and wires money for emergencies that happen with suspicious regularity, always on the 15th of the month, always exactly 3 days before payday. I worked my way through Portland State while my siblings partied at universities my parents helped pay for. I lived in a studio apartment in Beaverton with walls so thin I could hear my neighbor's Netflix through the drywall, while my brother Kyle bought a condo in the Pearl with a down payment that mysteriously appeared right after I sent mom $5,000 for what she called a medical emergency. I told myself it was temporary. That family helps family. That once everyone got stable, things would balance out. But stability never came. The asks just got bigger. And my father, the only one who seemed to notice, got quieter. He was a man of routines. Saturday morning garage time. Sunday Blazers games on the radio. Wednesday night calls where he'd ask about my job at Intel, really ask, not just wait for his turn to talk. He never asked me for money. Not once. And when everyone else did, when mom would conference call me and Diane to strategize about helping Kyle through a rough patch, my father would disappear into the garage, the door closing with a soft click that sounded like disappointment. 2 months before he died, he took me to lunch at the Waffle Window on Hawthorne. Just us. No agenda. We split a plate of chicken and waffles, and halfway through, he set down his fork and said something I didn't understand at the time. "You know what's harder than building something?" he asked. I shook my head. "Protecting it after you're gone." I thought he was talking about his business, the small HVAC company he'd sold 3 years earlier. But he wasn't looking at the table. He was looking at me. Now, standing in that funeral home with an envelope burning a hole in my purse and my family circling like sharks who just smelled blood in the water, I finally understood. My father hadn't just left me an inheritance. He'd left me a strategy. A way to survive the people who loved me and drained me in equal measure. A plan for the moment they stopped pretending to care and started demanding their share. And that moment was coming. I could feel it in my mother's too tight smile. In my sister's calculating glances. In my brother's silence, the kind that always preceded an ask he thought he'd already earned the right to make. So if you've ever been the strong one, the reliable one, the ATM with a heartbeat, stay with me. Because what happened next, what my father set in motion from beyond the grave, it wasn't just about money. It was about finally being seen. The pattern started small, the way poison always does. I was 16, working the closing shift at a Starbucks on Burnside, the kind where drunk people stumbled in at 10 p.m. demanding complicated drinks they'd forget by morning. I'd come home smelling like espresso and bleach, my tips folded into my apron pocket, and my mother would be waiting at the kitchen table with that look. Not angry. Worried. The kind of worry that made you feel guilty for having money while she didn't. "Sweetheart," she'd say, voice soft as worn cotton. "I hate to ask, but the electric bill came, and your father's hours got cut again. $40 here. $60 there." I'd hand it over before she finished the sentence, watching her shoulders drop with relief, watching her smile return. That smile felt like love. I didn't know yet it was training. By college, the asks had evolved. My freshman year at Portland State, I lived off campus in a basement studio in Selwood that flooded every time it rained. I worked 2 jobs, mornings at a daycare in Milwaukee, evenings tutoring calculus at the library. My paychecks disappeared into a rotating crisis fund for my family. Kyle's car broke down. Diane needed books for her nursing program at University of Oregon, the one my parents helped co-sign loans for while I filled out FAFSA forms alone at 2 a.m., too tired to cry. Mom's tooth cracked. Dad's truck needed new tires. Always something. Always urgent. Always landing in my lap like I was the only one with hands. I remember the exact moment I realized the imbalance wasn't temporary. Christmas, 2018. We gathered at my parents' house in Gresham, the same split-level ranch I'd grown up in, with the sagging porch and the maple tree out front that dropped helicopters every spring. Kyle showed up in a brand new Subaru Outback, pearl white, still wearing dealer tags. Diane wore a Canada Goose jacket that cost more than my rent. I arrived in my 2004 Honda Civic with a check engine light I couldn't afford to diagnose and a Costco sheet cake I'd bought because I didn't have time to bake. My mother hugged Kyle first, longer, tighter. My father stood by the fireplace, hands in his pockets, watching. When I asked Kyle how he afforded the car, he laughed. Got a great deal. Parents helped with the down payment. My mother refilled his coffee without asking. She didn't refill mine. That night, my father found me in the garage, sitting on an overturned bucket, scrolling through Venmo requests I hadn't answered yet. He didn't say anything at first. Just handed me a beer, twisted the cap off his own, and sat on the workbench beside me. The space smelled like motor oil and sawdust and the ghost of every project he'd started and never finished. You give a lot, he said finally. I shrugged. Family helps family. He took a long sip, eyes on the concrete floor. They teach sharks that in the ocean? I looked at him, confused. He met my gaze, and for the first time I saw something I'd never seen before. Sadness. Not for himself. For me. Sharks only stop eating when the food runs out, he said quietly. Then he stood, squeezed my shoulder once, and walked back inside, leaving me alone with a half-empty beer and a truth I wasn't ready to swallow. The service itself felt like a performance I hadn't been given the script for. Pastor Mitchell from Grace Community Church, a man my father had met exactly twice, spoke about eternal rest and faithfulness, reading from notes someone else had written. The pews were half full. Some faces I recognized, neighbors from the old Gresham house, a few guys from my dad's HVAC days. But most were family, and most of them looked bored. My mother sat in the front row, black dress from Macy's with the tag still tucked inside the collar. I'd seen her pull them out in the parking lot, check the return policy, then tuck them back in. She dabbed at her eyes with tissue, but her makeup stayed perfect. Stage tears. The kind that looked real from a distance. Kyle sat beside her, scrolling his phone under the fold of the program. Every few minutes, he'd glance up, nod solemnly like he was listening, then go back to whatever Reddit thread had his attention. Diane sat on the other side, whispering to her husband Todd, who'd shown up in a Patagonia fleece like we were going hiking after this. Neither of them had visited my father in the hospital. Not once during those last 2 weeks when he could barely speak but still asked the nurses if I'd eaten that day. Behind them, the extended family spread out like a gallery of people who suddenly remembered we existed. Aunt Cheryl, who hadn't returned a call in 6 years, wore a fascinator hat like this was the Kentucky Derby. Cousin Brandon, who'd ghosted me after I said I couldn't loan him $3,000 for a business opportunity, now leaned forward, trying to catch my eye, mouthing we should talk soon. Uncle Dennis stood in the back, arms crossed, lips moving as he calculated something only he could see. I sat alone in the second row. No one asked if I wanted company. No one saved me a seat up front. I was fine with that. From where I sat, I could see all of them. And I could see what they couldn't hide. The whispering started during the eulogy. My mother's sister, Aunt Linda, leaned toward Mom and murmured something behind her program. Mom nodded, patted her hand. Kyle glanced back at me, then at Diane. She shrugged. The air in the chapel shifted, thickened. I felt it before I understood it. They were already dividing what hadn't been buried yet. After the service, during that terrible liminal space where people mill around and no one knows what to say, the circling began. Aunt Cheryl cornered me by the guest book, her perfume so strong it made my eyes water. Honey, I know this is hard, but we need to talk about arrangements. Your father owned that house outright, didn't he? Cousin Brandon materialized beside the coffee station. Hey, Ratch. Listen, I know it's not the time, but if there's anything, any estate stuff that needs handling, I've got a buddy who's a financial planner. Kyle found me near the chapel exit. Mom's worried about bills. Dad had life insurance, right? We should probably sit down this week and go over everything. Not one of them asked how I was. Not one of them said they'd miss him. They talked around his death like it was an inconvenient scheduling conflict, and underneath every condolence was the same unspoken question, what's in it for me? And my mother, standing in the center of it all, caught my eye across the room. She smiled. Soft. Sad. The smile of a woman who'd just lost her husband. But her hand rested on her purse. And her fingers tapped. Counting. I didn't open the envelope right away. I couldn't. Not in the chapel, not in the parking lot where Diane tried to flag me down, not during the drive back to my apartment in the Pearl where the city lights blurred through rain I barely noticed. I set it on my kitchen counter next to a bottle of Pinot Noir I'd been saving for a celebration that never came, and I stared at it for 20 minutes, my father's handwriting staring back. Open only when they ask for money they'd already asked. 3 times before we'd even left the funeral home. I poured the wine. Sat down. And opened it. The envelope was thicker than I expected, stuffed with papers that spilled across my countertop like evidence at a crime scene. The first thing I saw was his handwriting again, this time on a yellow legal pad page, the kind he used to sketch HVAC diagrams and grocery lists. But this wasn't a list. It was a letter. Rachel, it started. If you're reading this, they've already started asking. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from this while I was alive. I tried. God knows I tried. But your mother, your siblings, they have a way of making me feel like the problem when I bring it up. So I stopped bringing it up. I started writing it down instead. My throat closed. I kept reading. I've been documenting everything for 3 years. Every request. Every lie. Every time they took from you and called it love. I didn't want to believe it at first. I wanted to think I'd raised better people. But the numbers don't lie, sweetheart. And neither do the patterns. By the time you read this, you'll have spent over $127,000 keeping this family afloat. They'll tell you it was loans. It wasn't. They'll say they were going to pay you back. They won't. I know because I asked them. And when I asked, they looked at me like I was crazy for keeping track. I set the letter down, hands shaking, and reached for the next document. It was a spreadsheet. Excel, printed in landscape mode, with columns labeled date, recipient, amount, stated reason, and actual use. My father had color-coded it. Green for amounts under $500. Yellow for $500 to $2,000. Red for anything above that. There was a lot of red. April 2019, $1,200 to Mom. Stated reason, medical emergency. Actual use, Diane's bachelorette trip to Cannon Beach. September 2020, $3,000 to Kyle. Stated reason, car repair. Actual use, down payment on new Subaru. December 2021. $2,500 to Mom. Stated reason, property tax. Actual use, Christmas gifts for grandchildren I'd never been asked to meet. Each line was backed by evidence. Screenshots of Venmo transactions. Printed text messages. Bank statements with highlighted transfers. My father had documented every dollar I'd sent, then cross-referenced it with what the money actually funded. Credit card statements. Facebook posts showing purchases made days after I'd wired cash. Instagram photos of vacations I'd unknowingly paid for, tagged with captions like #blessed and family first. I flipped to the next section. Loan agreements. 3 of them. My signature forged on documents I'd never seen, co-signing for a car lease, an emergency medical loan, and something labeled home improvement line of credit. All opened in my name. All tied to my social security number. All showing balances I'd never agreed to carry. My father's note, paper clipped to the top. Asterisk, they used your credit without asking. I found out when a collections notice came to the house addressed to you. I told your mother to fix it. She said you wouldn't mind. I'm attaching copies of everything. You'll need them, asterisk. The fourth section was worse. Text messages, and then, buried at the bottom of the stack, a single page. My father's handwriting again, shaky this time, like it hurt to write. When they ask for their share of my estate, give them this. All of it. Then tell them the truth, I left everything to you. Not because I loved them less, but because you're the only one who ever loved me without a price tag attached. The house, the savings, the life insurance, it's yours. Protect it. Protect yourself. And Rachel, stop giving to people who only know how to take. You've been holding this family together for years. It's time to let go, asterisk. I sat there, the city humming outside my window, the pages spread across my counter like a map of every time I'd been used. The wine sat untouched. My chest felt hollow, but underneath the hollow, something harder formed. Something sharp. My father had seen it all. He'd watched them bleed me dry. And now, from a grave still fresh, he'd handed me the knife. I didn't cry at the funeral. Not when they lowered the casket. Not when Pastor Mitchell said the final prayer. Not even when they handed me the folded flag, crisp and heavy, like grief had a weight you could measure. But sitting alone in my apartment at 11 p.m., surrounded by evidence of my own erasure, I broke. It wasn't the money. I'd made peace with the money years ago, told myself it was the cost of keeping people I loved from drowning. What shattered me was smaller, sharper. It was a single piece of paper I almost missed, tucked between two bank statements like it didn't matter. A birthday card. The kind you buy at Walgreens, generic flowers on the front, pre-printed message inside. But my father had added his own note at the bottom in blue ink, asterisk, happy 25th, Rachel. Proud of who you are, not just what you do. Love, Dad, asterisk. Paperclip to the card was a photocopy of a check. My handwriting. $150, made out to him, dated 3 days after that birthday. Below it, another note in his shaky script, written recently, the ink darker, the letters uneven, asterisk. She gave this from her first real paycheck at Intel. Rent was due. She had $30 left for groceries. I didn't know until I saw her eating ramen for 2 weeks straight. They never asked if she had enough left for herself, asterisk. That's when I broke. Not with sound, just with pressure. My chest caved, my breath stopped, and I pressed my palms into my eyes until I saw stars. Because he'd known. He'd seen me struggling and said nothing because he didn't want to embarrass me. He'd watched me give and hollow myself out, and he couldn't stop it. But he'd been keeping score. Not out of spite. Out of love. The only kind he had left to give. I picked up the card, the paper soft and worn like he'd held it often. The crease along the fold had deepened. The corners were bent. He'd kept it for 7 years, long enough for the flowers on the front to fade, long enough to watch the pattern repeat itself until it killed him. My father died of a heart attack. That's what the doctor said. Acute myocardial infarction, sudden, no warning. But sitting there with his notes spread across my counter, I wondered if you could die from watching people you love destroy someone else you love, slowly, politely, with requests that sounded like emergencies and love that looked like invoices. I thought about all the times he'd tried to say something. The garage conversation. The long pauses during family dinners when Mom mentioned needing help and his fork would stop midair. The way he'd ask me, asterisk, are you okay, sweetheart? Asterisk, and I'd lie, and he'd nod, and we'd both pretend the lie was enough. He'd tried to protect me the only way he knew how. With silence first. Then with documentation. And finally, with this. A strategy. A weapon. A father's last act of love disguised as paperwork. I folded the card carefully and set it beside the envelope, my hand steadier now. The grief didn't leave. It settled. Sank into my bones and made a home there. But underneath it, something else grew. Resolve. My father had seen me when no one else did. He'd believed I was worth saving. And if he could spend 3 years building a case to protect me from his own family, the least I could do was use it. Not for revenge. For survival. For the boundary he'd drawn in ink, hoping I'd be strong enough to hold the line. I picked up my phone. Opened the group chat. My mother had already sent 3 messages since the funeral, each one a little more pointed. Asterisk, we need to talk about the estate. When are you free? This isn't something we should put off. Asterisk, I typed one sentence, then deleted it. Typed another, then stopped. Finally, I just wrote, asterisk Saturday. 2 p.m. Ava Jeans on Division. Bring everyone, asterisk. Then I poured the wine. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for taking something just for me. They arrived like a delegation, not a family. My mother came first, heels clicking against the hardwood at Ava Jeans, her black dress swapped for something softer, cream-colored, the kind designed to make her look vulnerable. Diane followed, Todd trailing behind with his hands shoved in his pockets like he'd been dragged. Kyle showed up last, still wearing the same Patagonia vest from the funeral, AirPods dangling from one ear. Like this was just another meeting he'd squeeze between podcasts. I'd already ordered coffee. Black. The waiter had looked at me with something like pity when I'd said I was expecting 4 more people but wouldn't be eating. He understood. Portland waiters always do. My mother slid into the booth across from me, adjusting her purse on the seat with the kind of care you give something expensive. Sweetheart, she said, voice dripping warmth. I know this week's been hard. We're all still processing. Diane nodded beside her. Kyle didn't look up from his phone. I said nothing. Just waited. Mom's smile flickered, just for a second, before resetting. Your father would have wanted us to handle this together. As a family. There it was. The setup. The language they always used before the ask. Asterisk, your father would have wanted. Family helps family, asterisk, the same script, just rewritten for a new occasion. We've been going through his accounts, Kyle said, finally pocketing his phone. The house in Gresham is paid off. There's the life insurance policy. Some savings. Probably around 400,000 total, give or take. He said it casually, like he was reading a Zillow listing. We figure if we split it 4 ways, 3 ways, Diane corrected. Mom should get half. Then we split the rest. I sipped my coffee. Still said nothing. Mom reached across the table, her hand landing on mine, soft and warm and suffocating. Rachel, honey, I know you're doing well. You've got your job, your apartment. You're stable. But Kyle's been struggling since the layoffs, and Diane just had the baby, and her voice cracked perfectly, right on cue. I don't know how I'm going to manage that house alone. The property taxes, the upkeep. You could sell it, I said quietly. Her hand tightened. It's your father's house. Our home. I can't just. You could downsize, I continued. Get something smaller. More manageable. Diane's jaw set. Are you seriously suggesting Mom move right after losing Dad? Kyle leaned forward, elbows on the table. Look, we're not trying to pressure you. We're just talking about what's fair. You've always been the responsible one, Ratch. We know you'll do the right thing. The right thing. There it was. The phrase they'd weaponized my entire life. Doing the right thing meant giving when they asked. Staying quiet when they took. Shrinking so they had room to grow. We're not asking for everything, Mom said, her voice a whisper now, eyes glistening. Just what we're entitled to. What your father would have wanted us to have. Todd finally spoke, his voice low and careful. I think what everyone's trying to say is, we're family. We take care of each other. Right? They all looked at me then. Waiting. Expecting. So certain I'd fold the way I always had. My mother's hand still rested on mine, warm and damp. Kyle's expression was neutral, bored even, like this was already decided. Diane's eyes held something sharper. Resentment, maybe. Like I was the problem for making them ask out loud. I reached into my bag and pulled out the brown accordion folder my father had left. Set it on the table between the coffee cups and untouched water glasses. The silence shifted. Sharpened. Before we talk about what Dad wanted, I said, my voice steady, calm, cold, let's talk about what he knew. I opened the folder slowly, letting the sound of papers shifting fill the silence. My mother's hand slipped off mine. Kyle's eyes narrowed. Diane leaned back like the folder might bite. Dad left me everything, I said. No preamble. No softening. Just the truth, clean and sharp. The house. The savings. The life insurance. All of it. The table erupted. Not loud, Ava Jeans doesn't allow loud, but the kind of contained chaos that happens when people forget they're in public. Kyle's chair scraped. Diane's mouth opened and closed. My mother's face drained of color so fast I thought she might faint. That's impossible, Mom whispered. We had a will. He told me. He changed it, I said. 2 years ago. September 2022. Right after you told him I wouldn't mind co-signing for Diane's husband's truck loan. I slid the first document across the table. A copy of the revised will, notarized, witnessed, legally airtight. He didn't tell you because he knew you'd try to change his mind. Diane grabbed the paper, her hands shaking. This is insane. He wouldn't, Mom, this has to be a mistake. It's not. I pulled out the second document. The spreadsheet. 3 years of transactions, color-coded, cross-referenced, backed by bank statements I stacked beside it like evidence in a trial. He kept track of everything. Every dollar I sent. Every reason you gave. Every lie about paying me back. Kyle snatched the spreadsheet, his face hardening as he scanned the rows. $127,000? His voice cracked. You're saying we owe you. I'm saying you took it, I corrected. And Dad documented it. Down to the Venmo memo lines. My mother's voice came out strangled, desperate. Rachel, sweetie, this is a misunderstanding. We were going to pay you back. We just needed time. You had years. I slid another stack across the table. Screenshots. Text messages. The group chat I'd never been included in. My mother's words, preserved in 12-point font, asterisk Rachel's doing fine. She won't miss it, asterisk Kyle's reply, asterisk just tell her it's an emergency. She always caves. Asterisk Diane's message, asterisk Dad's asking questions again. We need to be more careful, asterisk. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of exposure. Full of recognition. Full of the terrible clarity that comes when you can't deny what's printed in front of you. Diane shoved the papers away. So what? You're cutting us off? After everything we've been through? No, I said quietly. Dad is. He added a clause. I pulled out the final document, my father's amendment, typed and notarized. Anyone who contests the will must first repay all documented loans, with interest, before they're eligible to challenge the estate. Kyle laughed, sharp and bitter. That's not enforceable. It is in Oregon, I said. Dad's lawyer confirmed it. You want to fight this? Pay me back first. Every cent. With the interest calculated at the legal rate of 9% per year. I did the math out loud. That's about $183,000. Split 3 ways. Call it 61,000 each. My mother looked like I'd struck her. You can't be serious. I'm not, I said. Dad was. I slid 3 sealed envelopes across the table, each one labeled with a name. He wrote you letters. Personal ones. He wanted you to read them before you decided what to do next. None of them reached for the envelopes. They just sat there, staring, as the weight of it settled. My father hadn't just protected me. He'd stripped them bare. And he'd done it in the quietest, most devastating way possible. With receipts. With truth. With the one thing they could never argue against, their own words. I stood, leaving the folder and the letters on the table. When you're ready to talk, you know where to find me. Then I walked out, the door closing softly behind me, leaving them to sit with the ghosts of every lie they'd ever told. They didn't call for 3 days. No texts. No voicemails. Just silence, the kind that used to make me anxious, the kind that would have sent the old version of me spiraling into guilt. But this time, the silence felt clean. Final. Like a door closing on a room I'd been trapped in for years. On the 4th day, Diane sent a single text, * we need to talk. Just you and me * I didn't respond. Kyle tried next, a voicemail left at 2 a.m., his voice slurred and angry. You think you're better than us now? Dad would be ashamed of what you did. I deleted it without finishing. My mother waited a full week. Then she called from a number I didn't recognize, her voice small, shaking. Rachel, please. I don't understand why you're doing this. We're your family. I let it go to voicemail. Listened once. Then blocked the number. The lawyer called 2 weeks later. Your mother's attorney reached out, he said, his voice tired but unsurprised. They're exploring options to contest the will. I waited. But they haven't filed anything yet. I think they're realizing the clause makes it nearly impossible without significant financial exposure. Good, I said. They also requested a meeting. Your mother wants to apologize. Says she didn't realize how much they'd taken from you. She knew, I said quietly. She just didn't think I'd ever stop giving. He paused. What do you want me to tell them? Nothing. Let them sit with it. By the end of the month, the chaos had settled into something permanent. Kyle stopped trying to contact me entirely. Diane sent one last message, I hope you're happy now. I was. Not in the way she meant, not with vindictive joy or satisfaction. But with something quieter. Relief. The weight I'd carried since I was 16, the constant pressure of being needed, wanted only for what I could provide, it was gone. My father had cut the strings. All I had to do was walk away. I sold the house in Gresham. It closed in 43 days. The new owners were a young couple with a baby on the way, the kind of family my father would have liked. I kept one thing from the house, his toolbox, the red Craftsman he'd had since before I was born, scratched and dented and full of tools he'd organized with the same care he'd organized my evidence. I moved into a bigger place in the Pearl, one with windows that faced west so I could watch the sunset over the West Hills. I donated half the inheritance to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students at Portland State. The rest, I kept. Not because I needed it, but because my father wanted me to have it. Because for once, something was mine without condition. 3 months after the funeral, I drove to Willamette National Cemetery where they'd buried him with military honors. The grave was simple. Just his name, his dates, and the words he'd chosen years before, * he tried. * I knelt in the grass, damp from morning rain, and pressed my hand against the cold marble. Thank you, I whispered. For seeing me. For protecting me. For loving me enough to let me go. The wind moved through the trees. Somewhere behind me, a hawk called. And for the first time since he died, I felt him. Not gone. Just free. Both of us, finally, allowed to rest. I stood, brushed the grass from my knees, and walked back to my car. Behind me, the cemetery stretched quiet and still. Ahead, the city hummed with a life I was finally ready to live. Not for them. For me. So that's where the story ends. Not with reconciliation or a tearful family reunion. Not with forgiveness that tastes like surrender. Just with space. The kind of space that lets you breathe without checking over your shoulder to see who needs something from you next. I didn't write this to tell you my family was evil. They weren't. They were just people who'd learned that love could be conditional, that asking was easier than earning, and that some people will give until there's nothing left if you just know how to ask. My father saw that pattern before I did. And instead of letting it destroy me after he was gone, he built me an exit. If you're still with me, if this story felt familiar in ways that hurt, I need you to do something. Not for me. For yourself. Pause right here and hit that subscribe button. Tap the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. And down in the comments, tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing cities and states pop up: Portland, Atlanta, Phoenix, Brooklyn, wherever you are. Drop your location below. Let me know I'm not talking to an empty room, ***, and if you've ever been the one holding a family together while they picked you apart piece by piece, tell me your story. Your words matter. Your experience matters. You're not alone in this. Because here's the truth nobody tells you when you're growing up as the responsible one, the reliable one, the one everyone turns to when things fall apart. They don't teach you that love without boundaries isn't love. It's extraction. They don't warn you that family can be the first place you learn to disappear, to make yourself small, to measure your worth in how much you can give before you finally break. I spent 17 years funding a hierarchy I didn't even know I was part of. 17 years believing that if I just gave enough, loved enough, sacrificed enough, eventually they'd see me. Really see me. Not as a solution or a safety net, but as a person who mattered beyond what I could provide. My father saw me. That's the part that still cracks me open when I think about it too long. He didn't have the tools to stop it while he was alive. Maybe he didn't know how, or maybe he tried and I just couldn't hear him over the noise of everyone else's needs. But he saw me. And he made sure that when the asking turned into taking, when the taking turned into erasing, I'd have proof that I wasn't crazy. That it wasn't all in my head. That the weight I carried was real, documented, undeniable. So if you're reading this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you're the one who always answers, always helps, always bends until you're about to break, listen to me. You don't owe anyone access to you just because you share blood. You don't owe anyone your future because they claim they shaped your past. And you sure as hell don't owe anyone an explanation when you finally choose yourself. My father left me more than money. He left me permission. Permission to stop. To protect what's mine. To build a life that doesn't require me to be empty so someone else can be full. That envelope he handed me at the funeral wasn't just evidence. It was freedom. And if you're still waiting for someone to hand you permission to walk away from people who only love you when you're useful, this is it. This story. Right here. Consider it your envelope. You don't need their approval. You don't need their understanding. You just need to stop funding the system that's draining you. So tell me, where are you watching from? What city? What state? Drop it in the comments below. And if this story hit close to home, share it. Someone in your life needs to hear this. Someone still sitting at a table, handing over pieces of themselves, waiting for a love that's never coming. Subscribe. Comment. Share. And most importantly, protect what's yours. My father taught me that. And now I'm teaching you.